here.
You found it?
You told me here, and I'm going to try to find it in English.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Talmud Megillah. We are on page 5B. In the Steinsaltz Koran edition that we're using, we're in the bottom of page 220. In the regular Gemara, we're towards the beginning of the wide lines at the bottom. Gufa. It starts with the word Gufa. So if you are curious about some ancient Israel geography and identifying names of cities and descriptions of their names and why they got named that way, and for our purposes, we're trying to figure out which cities were walled cities, were not walled cities, and laws of Megillah reading, of course. So that is going to be a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today. So remember that we were discussing about Tiberius. Okay, that's going to be a big topic today. Is Tiberius a walled city from the times of Joshua, Yeshua ben Nun, or not? Right? So Rabbi, the Gemara said earlier, the Rabbi assumed that it was. Yeah? And Chizkiah, however, Chizkiah used to read Megillah both on the 14th and the 15th. Why? Because the Gemara says he was not sure. It was walled in his times, but he wasn't sure if it was walled already going back to the times of Yeshua ben Nun, which is the criteria for a walled city. Remember that? Gufa, so we stated earlier, Chizkiah kare b'Tiberia bar Beisar uva Chamesar. Chizkiah used to read the Megillah. He lived in Tiberia, in Tiberias, and he would read the Megillah on the 14th and the 15th of Adar because Misapkele, he was in doubt whether or not it was walled from the times of Yeshua ben Nun and the Jews entering into Israel. The Gemara asks, is there a doubt about the status of Tveria? There isn't. I'll prove to you that its status is clear. Because there's a pasuk where in the book of Yeshua, in the times of Joshua, and the pasuk says, V'are mivtzar, and the following were the fortified, in other words, walled cities: Hatzidim, Tzer, v'Hamas, Rakas, v'Chineres. Tzidim, Tzer, Hamas, Rakas, and Kineres. Okay, you've heard of those four cities in northern Israel?
Kineres, is that from Kinneret?
It's a river. There's also a city, apparently. Right? Okay. We're going to be talking about some of these cities. So, V'Kaimalon, and we have a tradition, we've established, Rakas zu Tveria, that the city of Rakas mentioned in this verse with Yeshua, that refers to Tveria. Oh, hello, Johnny.
Sorry.
You have a note?
You have a note? I raised my hand.
Okay, fine. In my days, they would actually care if we came late to school. Nowadays, no one asks any questions. We're just happy they come at some point in time.
At your leisure.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
We have to go to the principal's office if we were late, the tensions.
This is a big deal when I was
coming late, right?
Mom was like, nervous.
Yeah.
We live far.
Today we can't get kids out of the bed. So that's the issue also, because transporting, right? I used to go to school myself. I wrote a book back to school.
You're all right?
Yeah.
Like
every day.
5 minutes by car.
You were far. Yeah. So today also, my kids, it's a 20-minute drive. So, there might be traffic. It's not around the corner. So. Anyhow, we're on the bottom of 220. So we said that Chizkiah used to read Megillah on the 14th and the 15th because he lived in Tveria and he wasn't sure if Tveria was a walled city from times of Yeshua ben Nun or not. So the Gemara is asking, of course we know that Tveria is a walled city because the pasuk in Yeshua, when Yeshua enters into Israel and he's describing and mapping out the land, he talks about four cities, right? Four walled, fortified cities. Tzidim, Tsar, Hamas, Rakas, Kineres. And we established, as the Gemara, Rakas is Tveria. Now, how do we know Rakas is Tveria? Okay, we're going to talk about that. But if Rekha says Tveria, it's listed as one of the walled cities from the times of Yeshua, from a pasuk, from a verse in the book of Yeshua. So what's Chizkiah in doubt for? So the Gemara gives a very interesting answer. This was, the following was the doubt of Chizkiah. Mishum dachat gisa shura diyamo havas. Indeed, Tiberias was a walled city, but it had like 3 walls, and then the 4th wall was the coast line, was the cliff, to the beach, to the sea. Is that considered a wall or not?
It can't be that fortified because you can get through by ships.
Not so easy to get up. That's actually a good position to have right there up on the cliff. That's a good position for the defenders to have.
Oh, so it's not a cliff.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was a wall, but it was a natural wall, a sea wall. So he wasn't sure if that's considered a wall or not. And if it's not a wall, then Tiberias is not fully walled, then it's right. So we're going to have to work with the following. Yeshua calls this city Arei Mivtzar, a fortified city, okay, which we're assuming means a walled city. But now we've discovered that Tiberias, one of its walls, it was fortified, but one of its walls was not a real wall. It was a natural sea wall. It was fortified, but like militarily fortified, but is it considered a walled city? Now, think about the other thing. What's even the source for this concept that walled cities read on the 15th and unwalled cities read on the 14th? It doesn't say it actually in the Megillah. The only thing the Megillah does say is the Alkein Yehudim HaPrazim, the Jews that live in Prazim. And we interpreted, what does Prazim mean? Prazim means to be open and exposed. So we said that the exposed cities, and we identified that or interpreted that as the unwalled cities, they read on the 14th. But that would tell us, from there we learned that the walled cities read on the 15th, like Shushan, right? So now we have, with this information that I've given you, we have to try to figure out, Chizkiah was in doubt, is Tiberias a walled city in terms of the law of Megillah reading? And we have to figure this out. So the Gemara asks, if indeed you're saying that the reason why Chizkiah had a doubt was because one of its walls was a sea wall, hold on a minute. Then why is there a doubt? Then it's absolutely, certainly not a walled city if one of its walls is a sea wall. How come? The Tanya, because we learned in the Brisa, remember we discussed this once, the Torah talks about different kinds of homes. Homes that are homes in walled cities, or homes that are homes in unwalled cities. And there's different laws about the redeeming of the home and the returning of the home. Wherever you purchase the home, remember that by the Yovel, by the Jubilee year, all homes get returned back to their original ancestral ownership. And then within a year or within 2 years, you may have the option, right? So there were different law criteria with homes inside or outside walled cities. So the Torah describes Asher Lo Choma, which has a wall, and we learn out from there what's considered the wall of the city, that it's a home within a walled city. Velo Shur Egar, not a row of homes and roofs that create, is it roofs or roofs? It's roofs, yeah, with the F. You can have a neighborhood where the homes are very neatly designed, that all the back wall of the homes, like townhomes, they're all sharing a wall, or the roofs are all being shared. So it creates a kind of wall on that side of the neighborhood. However, the Gemara says that when the Torah talks about lo choma, it has a wall, it excludes, not considering that house walls or house roofs as a wall.
Because it's not really fortified.
Correct. Well, I'm not sure if fortified is the criteria over here.
Right.
And the other thing that the Brisa says, that the Torah continues, Saviv, that it has these walls around the city. Saviv excludes Prat L'Tveria Sheyam Machamasa. It excludes the city of Tveria, which one of its walls is the sea. There's a clear Brisa that excludes Tiberias from being a walled city. With regards to the laws of the homes that are considered homes in the walled cities, with regards to the laws of sale and redemption of homes. With regards to those laws, from the fact that the Torah says, Saviv, the walls have to be around, that you need 4 walls around the whole city, that excludes Tiberias, which one of its walls is a seawall. So based on this brisa about that topic, the Gemara says that should be able to resolve our topic and tell us that if if Chizkiya's concern or doubt was because one of the walls of Tiberias was a seawall, well, then absolutely should not be considered a walled city. And you should read on the 14th. So the Gemara answers, not so simple. You can't just compare apples and oranges. With regards to the topic of homes and the sale and purchase and redemption of homes and whether they're considered homes in walled or unwalled cities, there's no doubt the Torah is clear. It has to be choma, has to be a wall, not a lining up of the roofs. Has to be saviv, has to be four walls around. That's clear. But what was Chizkiya's doubt about? Le'inin mikra Megillah, regarding a different law, the Megillah reading. And here the Megillah reading may have a different criteria about what's considered a walled city. Why? Because, again, remember, all we have in the Megillah is the word prazim. My prazim, my mukafin. So we said there's prazim, which are some kind of unwalled city, and there's mukafin, some kind of city that's surrounded by walls. What is the criteria and the status of unwalled or walled cities? Dichsivi gabe mikra Megillah, regarding the laws of Megillah reading. Is it? You could look at it in two ways. Is it mishum dahani migli? Is it that the prazim are exposed cities? Bahani loy migli and the mukafin are the unexposed cities? Is that the meaning? Well then, bahani nama migli. Then the seawall of Tiberias still leaves Tiberias exposed. Meaning, can you see in? Is it an issue of visibility?
Is it exposed to visibility or exposed to
Rockets.
yeah?
Arrows, spears.
Yeah.
Very good. So that's the question here. Is it a visibility issue that differentiates the walled and the unwalled cities, and then Tiberias has the status of an unwalled city? Or maybe it's a different criteria. Unwalled cities are not protected, and walled cities are protected. And this seawall is a pretty good protection. It's a good defense position to have. That's why Chizkiya had a doubt about the status of Tiberias. He says, I know the law when it comes to defining the status of a home in Tiberia regarding the purchase and sale of homes. I know it's not considered a walled city because it's not saviv, it's not completely surrounded by a wall. But I don't know what its status is in regards to Megillah reading, because there the criteria is different. All we know is pizarim or mukafin, and I don't know if it's about a visibility issue or it's about a protection issue. And that's why he would read Megillah both on the 14th and the 15th of Adar. And that concludes that discussion about Chizkiya's custom in Tiberia. Where's the name Tiberias from, by the way? It's interesting because in Hebrew it's Tiberia, and in the English or Latin it's Tiberias. So there are those that say that it was a city founded in the 1st century after the Common Era, and it was named after Tiberius, who was one of the Roman emperors at the time.
It sounds like a Roman name.
Right. But the Gemara here has soon going to tell us other reasons for its naming in Hebrew, Tiberia. So I don't know what came first, what came second, who borrowed from who. But before we get there, another little anecdote. Rav Asi Kari Megillah Bohutsu Ba'abresa B'Chameser. There was a city called Hutzel. In which country was Hutzel? In Israel or Babylon?
Babylon.
Correct. Now, Johnny, say Israel.
I said Israel.
Correct. There was a Hutzel in Israel, there was a Hutzel in Babylon. And it's not clear which one did Rav Asi live in. One of the Hutzels. What does it say here? Here it says Babylon. But there's I think there's different opinions in the Rishonim. So Rav Asi would read the Megillah on the 14th and the 15th as well. He brings on the notes here. In Hutzel, there was a famous synagogue, which was described as a place where the divine spirit rests. A few sages are known to have lived in that city. So he would read on the 14th and 15th, again, because he was not sure if it was surrounded by walls from the times of Joshua or not. That is one opinion or version of Rav Asi's custom. There's another version that says, Rav Asi actually said, Hi Hutzel the Beis Binyamin, this Hutzel in the house of Binyamin, it is a walled city from the times of Yeshua, and therefore the correct date to read Megillah will be on the 15th of Adar. So there's two different versions about the opinion or the practice of Rav Asi.
The next two lines.
Yeah.
No?
What? The next line is beginning a whole new section of the Talmud.
Okay,
It continues.
Because I was like, has
Till
nothing to do
now, no. Now we're beginning a new concept. Okay, you ready? Okay, now we're going to get into the geography of Israel.
So the halacha is that a wall of roofs is not, and the sea is not.
Depends with regards to what? Megillah reading or purchase and sale of homes?
Consider a walled city.
Purchase and sale of homes, it's not considered a walled city. Regarding Megillah reading, we don't know. At least Chesky was unsure. Rabbi was sure that it is a walled city. Now, according to Rabbi, that would be it's not a walled city regarding one area of law, but it is a walled city regarding a different area of law. What's the practice in Tveria today for Purim? You never know. You ever been in Tveria for Purim? I don't even know.
So is this still happening now?
Probably.
In an old walled city? They were in Israel?
Well, in Jerusalem, they read on the 15th. Yeah. But here's I wonder if the people that still read both days in Tveria. I don't know. Maybe somebody knows. I have to look it up. Oh, Rabbi Yochanan taught the following: Ki avina Talia, when I was a young boy, Amina Milsa, I said something that later I inquired from the elders. Vishtakach kavasei, and they agreed with me. Okay, so let's hear what Rabbi Yochanan as a child had to offer. He said, Hamas, remember we mentioned a bunch of cities earlier that I quoted in the book of Yeshua. Hamas, Kineres, Lakas. What are these cities? They're not called this anymore. What are they?
Hamas.
Huh?
They translate Hamas.
Hamath.
Yeah.
Hamath.
Hamas.
That's the academic way of writing it. How does Passcode translate Hamas?
It's Tiberias. Chamas.
So that's the difference of Passcode and Steinsaltz. Passcode is Yeshivish. It's more Hamas. And Steinsaltz is Hamath.
With a TH?
Yep.
With a T.
Two M's.
Two M's.
H. Yep.
And you?
What? Chamas.
Simple.
Sfard, Ashkenaz, Teimani.
Exactly.
Okay, so he says, Hamas zu Tveria. Hamas is Tveria. You notice an issue already? Remember earlier we said that Rakas is Tveria. And now we're saying Hamas is Tveria. Okay, we're going to have to resolve this.
And this is according to Rabbi Yochanan.
Rabbi Yochanan. Hamas is Tveria. V'loma nikra shema Hamas. Why is it called Hamas? Al shum Chamei Tveria. You know about the hot springs of Tveria? A lot of good hot springs there. Even today.
Really?
But they've been around for thousands of years. And the Gemara talks about their incredible healing properties. People still go there today. The hot springs of Tveria. You didn't go to Glenwood? Vale? You went to Glenwood, yeah?
Yeah. We went to hot springs.
Huh?
We did.
In Glenwood.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Amazing.
100 degrees.
Yeah. All natural.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
can smell
Huh? You can smell.
it. Yeah.
That's because everybody that goes in there is filthy also.
These bugs are dead.
But I think all these hot springs have healing properties, but the Gemara speaks about Tveria. Tveria was known to, even today. Today there's a lot of healing resorts there with their hot springs.
Like the Dead Sea also.
Yeah, that's more the salt and the mud and the earth and yeah. Okay, so Hamas is Chamei Tveria, the hot springs of Tveria. Rakas, what's Rakas? Zu Tzipori, the northern city of Tzipori. Rakas, why is it called Rakas? B'shum de Medalia, because it was an elevated city. Keraksa de Nahara, like the bank is elevated over the river. So you have a bank and then the dip into the river, and the bank is called a Raksa. So therefore the city of Tzipori was called Rakas because it was an elevated city over its neighboring cities, like the bank to a river. Kineres is the city of Ginoisar. And why is Ginoisar called Kineres? The Misiki Pera Kala the Kinari, because in that city of Ginoisar, the fruits are so sweet. They're sweet like the sweet sounds of a harp. What's a harp in Hebrew? Kinor. Ahani Kinor, right at the end of the song of Yerushalayim Shel Zahav. So Kinneret comes from the word Kinor, which is a harp. Ginosar, look at the side of it here. He says, Ginosar is the name of a beautiful valley that stretches along the western shore of the Sea of Galilee, north of Tiberias. Josephus describes the area as follows. Its nature is wonderful as well as its beauty. Its soil is so fruitful that all sorts of trees can grow upon it, and the inhabitants accordingly plant all sorts of trees there. For the temper of the area is so well mixed that it agrees very well with those several sorts, particularly walnuts, which require the coldest air and flourish there in vast plenty. There are palm trees also, which grow best in hot air, fig trees, olives, unbelievable. It supplies men with principal fruit, with grapes and figs, clearly grown 10 months of the year. Amazing. And for beside the good temperature of the air, it's also watered from the most fertile fountain. This is the quote from Josephus in Wars of the Jews. So that's the city of Ginosar, which is near Tiberia. It's along the east coast of Israel. Near the Kinneret. Why is the Kinneret called Kinneret, the river? Ginosar, which was called Kinneret, was alongside the river Kinneret. And it's called Kinneret because it had such fertile land and such a great atmosphere and weather and conditions that it grew fruits as sweet as the sweetness of the sound of the harp. So, thus far we've established that Hamas is Tiberia, according to Rabbi Yochanan, even though earlier we said that Rakas is Tiberia. So the Gemara asks, Amar Rava. Rava challenges Rabbi Yochanan. Now, this is a statement that Rabbi Yochanan taught when he was a young child, but he said later I consulted with my senior teachers, and they agree with me. But now Rava challenges. Mi ikalamanda Omar Rakas left Tiberia here. Is there somebody that could really say and really hold that Rakas is not Tiberia? Everyone knows that Rakas is Tiberia and not Hamas being Tiberia. How does he know this? What's his proof? He's going to bring the following interesting proofs. 3 different scenarios he brings. Rava lived in Babylon. He said, when a person dies in Babylon, but he's a very prominent person, and everybody knows about him, and he's a great rabbi, and they do all kinds of gatherings and synagogues all over Babylon, all over Israel. They eulogize him, right? Like if a great rabbi at tzaddik would pass away in Israel, and we would make a ceremony here commemorating him. So he dies in Babylon. Hassam, there in Israel, or there in fact in Tiberia, Saftelei Hachi, they would eulogize him in the following way. Gadol hu basheshach. He was a great person in Bavel. V'shem loy berakas, and even though he was raised and lived in Bavel, he has a name and reputation all the way here in Rakas. Now this eulogy is being made in the city of Tiberia, and they're still calling it Tiberia Rakas. By the way, do you know why Sheshach is a name for Bavel?
Never heard of that.
Sheshach is mentioned in scripture, but it's also a reference to, it means Bavel, Babylon. And let's see if in the letters of the word you can find Bavel from Sheshach. In those letters you can find the word Sheshach, Bavel. It's a bit of a code. It's going to be hard to find.
No.
So there's one of the codes for gematria and for interpreting letters of the Torah is the...
Oh, is it backwards up? Aleph equals tet?
Tough.
The
Atbash code.
Yes.
Yes, Atbash. Yes. Aleph Taf, Bet Shin, Gimel Reish, Dalet Kuf, Hey Tzadik, Vav, Pei, etc. You can interchange first letter with last letter, second last letter, third letter, first last letter. So Shei Shach, Shin is the second last letter twice. That can be replaced with the second letter twice. What's the second letter? Base. And Chaf is, I don't know which letter exactly. Yeah, Chaf is the 11th letter going forward. Replace that with the 11th letter going backwards, which is only 22 letters. So it's actually the next letter because 11 and 11 is 22. So what's after Chaf is Lamed. So Chaf and Lamed are the two closest letters. They're interchangeable. So the Shin is replaced with the base and the Chaf with the Lamed, and Shei Shach becomes Bavel. Neat, huh?
We should have been able to figure that out.
Yeah. Not impressed. So that's how they eulogize him when he dies. A prominent person dies in Bavel. Now there's another scenario. A person dies in Bavel, but he's being his coffin, his remains are being transported to Israel to be buried in Tiberias. Softly Hachi. This is how they eulogize him in Tiberia at his funeral. Oyave Sridim, the lovers of the remnants. Lovers of the remnants. Who's lovers of the remnants? So the remnants are the Jews of Israel. They're called remnants because after the times of the destruction of the temple, Israel was not the center anymore. Babylon was the center. So anyone living in Israel was called the remnants of what once was. So the eulogizer would say, who turned to the local people gathered and say, Oave Sridim, lovers of remnants of Israel, Yoshvei Rakats, the residents of Rakas, to go out, the Kablu, and welcome Harubi Omek, the dead of the deep. Bavel, being known as a valley, it was low-lying land, is called Omek, compared to Israel that was higher, and Bavel was lower lands, so it's called Omek. So the eulogizer would say, go out and bring in the dead of the deep from Bavel, and he would call them the Shvei Rakas, residents of Rakas, that's living in Tiberia. A second proof that the Rakas is Tiberia. And the third proof is that the Rabbi Zera, when Rabbi Zera passed away. Now let's talk about Rabbi Zera. He lived most of his life in Babylon, but later in life he moved to Israel. And where did he move to? The great city of Tiberias. And then during his time, Tiberias was a hub. Already earlier, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, the last of the Tanoim, already moved to Tiberia, and they had the great Sanhedrin. One of the great courts were there, and it was a place of a lot of great sages. So Rabbi Zera moved there. And when he passed away, there was a certain eulogizer that eulogized him as follows. Eretz Shinar Hara. The land of Shinar conceived him. Shinar meaning Babylon again. V'yolda, and gave birth to him. Eretz Tzvi, the land of the deer, Gidla, raised him. Gidla Shah Shoeha, raised her delights. Oy Nala, woe is to her. Amr Rakas, say the city of Rakas, Ki Ibda Klichem Dasa, for she has lost her precious jewel. It's a nice eulogy. Who was this person that was born and raised in Eretz Shinar in Bavel? Later was his delights were delivered. He was raised in the land of Eretz Tzvi in Israel. And Rakas should lament that it has lost one of its greats. So this is talking about Rabbi Zera, born in Bavel, raised in Bavel, later moved to Israel, lived in Tiberia, and now Tiberia is bemoaning his loss. And it's being called Rakas again. You follow? Why is Israel called Eretz Tzvi, the land of the deer? So actually, Tzvi might not mean deer. Tzvi can mean colorful also. Beauty. The beauty of a multicolor. So it may be the beauty of Israel, or it may be deer. The Gemara says that Israel is compared to a deer. Why? Apparently, it says this about a deer, and it says it about, I think, also like a snake. The skin of a deer is very tight. It's very, I'm not sure what the right word for it. If you were to skin a deer, you can never put the skin back on. Now it's so stretched with the flesh when it's on, and once you take it off, it completely contracts, and it'd be impossible to stretch it out and put it back on. So the land of Israel is the same way. People talk about overpopulation, right? We're afraid, even though we have billions of open land space in America still of acres, but we're afraid of overpopulation. And they're all here. Yeah, go spread out somewhere. So, so Israel will never become overpopulated because the land stretches like the skin of a deer. More people, it'll just get bigger.
More people, no problem.
There's a lot of empty land still.
Sure. So it's compared to a deer. Anyhow, we have three proofs. The proof of the person that died and was buried in Bavel, but it was eulogized in Rakas, which was Tveria. The person that died in Bavel, but was buried in Rakas, Tveria. The Reb Zera who moved to Tveria, Rakas, and then died there. But in all these eulogies, we see that people refer to Tveria as Rakas. So why does Rabbi Yechanan tell me that Hamas is Tveria? No, Rakas is Tveria. So let's think how we're going to resolve this. Ella Omar Rabba, Rabba says, here's how we're going to resolve it. Hamas zu chamegrar. Hamas actually refers to the hot springs, like we said earlier, but the hot springs are a little south of Tiberias Central. They're not part of the main city. They're a little outside the city. So that would be, Hamas would refer to the outskirts of Tiberia. And Rakas would refer to Tiberias itself, the central city. And Kineres, once again, the Kineres is Genoisar, as we said earlier. Now, before we asked why is Tiberia called Hamas, and we answered because of its hot springs. But now that we're saying no, Hamas is the outskirts of Tiberia, where there's the hot springs. Rakas is Tiberia. So why is Tiberia called Rakas? Rakas. Why? So the Gemara answers. Sha'afilu rekonin shabbat malayin mitzvahs karimin. Because in Tiberias, even those who were the most empty ones, rake, the word rake means empty. Even the empty ones were filled with mitzvot like the seeds of a pomegranate. How many seeds are there in a pomegranate?
613.
Really? Have you counted? I know you were taught that in school. I was also taught that in school, but it's wrong.
It's wrong, right? Yeah. Has to be.
There's this common expression filled with mitzvot like the seeds of a pomegranate. So when we were in school, they foolishly taught us that, there were 613 mitzvot, 613 seeds in a pomegranate. No, it's not true. But the point is that there's a lot of seeds in a pomegranate. Each one is different, I think. No?
Yeah.
Each one is different. Let's make a project. Let's actually count. But the point is the plentiful of seeds. And that's the idea, the concept, the metaphor is that there should be this plentiful of mitzvot. Lots and lots and lots of mitzvot. Now, why is the pomegranate the metaphor for this? Are there no other fruits with like an abundance of seeds? Huh? I mean, when you open like these melons and these cantaloupes, you find a lot of seeds in the center, right?
Maybe.
The truth is the seeds of the pomegranate are edible. That's the fruit. What does it say?
200 to 1400.
200 to 1400. So actually 613 is almost in the middle there. It's a good average.
Yeah.
It's an average.
Not bad.
Beautiful.
The rabbis don't get it wrong.
Don't get it wrong. So by pomegranate, the seeds of the edible are the fruit, right? Other fruits have a lot of seeds, but that's not the fruit. You actually throw them out. The pomegranate, you actually eat the seeds.
That's true.
So that may be one of the ideas. So here's his expression is that even empty people, I guess they were spiritually impoverished, they were not refined, spiritually elevated, holy people, but they were still filled with a lot of mitzvot. Why the people of Tveria, or what was it about Tveria more than other places? I'm not sure. But this is a common teaching. There's another teaching elsewhere in the Talmud talking about Poshei Yisrael. There's this reference about the negligent people of Israel. So the Gemara says, "Afilu Poshei Yisrael malei mitzvahs karimin." Even the negligent people of Israel are filled with mitzvot like the seeds of a pomegranate. And there was once a meeting between the Lubavitcher Rebbe and another great Rosh Yeshiva, head of a yeshiva. They were talking different Torah, and this Gemara was quoted. And when the Gemara was quoted, the Rosh Yeshiva told the Rebbe, "I've always had a question on this phrase, because if they're called negligent people, then how are they filled with mitzvot, like seeds of a pomegranate?" And the Rebbe answered, "I also always had a question on this Gemara, but a little different than yours. If they're filled with mitzvot, like the seeds of a pomegranate, then why are they called negligent people?"
Two ways of looking at it.
Same question.
Half empty, half full.
So, think about it. You can have, I think you find a lot of, there's two kinds of mitzvot, right? There are ben adam lemakom, mitzvahs that are between man and God, and then ben adam l'chavero, mitzvahs between man and man. Yeah? And typically, and this is unfortunate this way, in many Jewish communities, they either excel in one or the other, but not both. This is a challenge. So some communities are great at the mitzvot between man and God. Shabbat is important, kashrus is important, nida is important, tefillin is important, davening is important, etc., etc. Lying, stealing, not caring, abusing, deceiving, not so important. And then you can have another kind of community where social, moral values, welfare values are very, very important. Caring about the other, living honestly, being upright, living by the law of the land, right? Very important. Shabbat, praying, kosher, not so important. Right? Really, this is like a description of the two.
There was that exact question. What's that little pamphlet that Mendy Boaz brings?
Yeah.
Does he still bring it?
We haven't, yeah.
There was that exact same question, I think, last week in it, that somebody asked.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. So in essence, if you want to go to its source, it comes from the two tablets, right? When God gave us the Torah, he gave us two tablets. First tablet was all the laws of what? Keep Shabbos, fear God, love God, only one God, etc., etc. All the mitzvot between man and God. The second tablet was don't murder, don't steal, don't kill, don't lie, don't deceive, don't commit adultery. Some communities took the first tablet. Some took the second one. How many people took both?
The good ones.
You'd like to think more, but
I think it's a lot of work to do on that. To treat one as important as the other.
but that was a discussion at my Shabbat table. That question.
Right. Everybody was asked the question. He looks so religious. How could he cheat in business? Yeah. I can ask another question. This person is so moral and such a ethical person. How can they not keep Shabbos? I mean, you can ask the question both ways, right? They really care about the law. They care about God. It goes both ways.
Imagine what that person would be if he wasn't that religious.
Oh,
You know?
yeah.
Maybe see it that way. He would be a murderer.
Listen,
That was just
in general,
he could have been
a
mass
this.
murderer.
You know?
then he would be a regular thief, but he wouldn't make a big Chil Hashem. He wouldn't make the front page of the New York Times because he's just a regular person. But now that he has a beard and a black hat, front page of New York Times.
Yep.
Right? Listen, what was I going to say? This is a question people ask a lot of times, right? All the time. It's landlord, religious guy, a rabbi. Everyone's a rabbi. If you have a beard, you're a rabbi. There's this rabbi and a landlord, and he's a slumlord. And I'm like, yeah. First of all, he's not a rabbi. He's a regular person.
Yeah.
Second of all, and I try to tell people all the time, do not judge anybody by their exterior. You don't. I'm not saying a person with a beard and a Kipper, I don't know if they're frum. What does the word frum mean? Are they devout, God-fearing, pious people? I don't know. And vice versa. If somebody's not wearing the beard, the kippah, whatever, is he not frum? Does he not care about God and the law and the Torah? I don't know. Maybe he does. Look at that. We shouldn't have expectations from anybody other than ourselves.
Whenever I speak to my son, I go, can I go to this restaurant? I saw people walking in there with tzitzit, and a yarmulke. Can I go there? Don't assume just because you saw somebody like that walking.
I know some people with very, very long piyot on the outside. And I know some people with very, very long piyot on the inside. Right?
Yeah, and what's more important?
The exterior and the interior have to match.
Exactly. In our morning prayers, we say, "Lo'olam yehei adam yirei shemayim baseser." A person should always be a God-fearing person, baseser, when he's alone. I see them in synagogue all the time. They're always praying. What a person does in the synagogue means nothing.
And you're signing your
It's got to be a little.
Nothing.
Little bit.
That's a social status that they want for themselves.
Yeah.
Person is judged, not by me, not by you, by themselves and by Hashem, but when they're alone in the home and nobody's watching. You want to know who you really are? That's when God decides who you really are. Right?
Well, we learn from these Gemara classes. Amazing. Yeah.
Look at the Rambam. Yeah, you see the book of Rambam here? There's 14 books of Rambam over here. He codified halacha. So before the Rambam, you had like this Jewish law scattered all over the Talmud. There's no categorization, there's no organization. And the Rambam was the first to organize Jewish law into 14 categories. And each one has a different name, right? Mada, the book of knowledge, Ava, Zmanin, all different mitzvot. And there's one book over there, it's number 4, you can see it's called Book of Kedusha, Book of Holiness. And which laws did the Rambam put into the Book of Holiness? It's a big name, holiness. Which laws? What? Which laws? Well, if you were to put, what are the most holiest laws of the Torah?
Shabbat,
Yom Kipper, Shema, faith, Torah study. None of those are in the Book of Holiness. There's only 2 categories of law in the Book of Holiness. Laws of forbidden foods, kashrus, and the laws of forbidden sexual relations.
Is that family purity?
Family purity, and in general, permitted and forbidden sexual behaviors. Shabbat doesn't make you holy. Synagogue doesn't make you holy. Prayer doesn't make you holy. Only 2 things that make you holy: your relationship with food and your relationship with sex.
Now, is this the Rambam's view, or
this is my view of the Rambam? Of course, Shabbat makes you holy, but Shabbat's an easy one. Meaning, I mean, either I do or I don't commit to Shabbat. But how do I deal with food? The foods that are good for me, the foods that are kosher to me, eating the right amounts, eating intentionally, not overeating, living conscientiously and mindfully when it comes to my sexual life. Which partner? Only a wife. When? Only the right times, in the right way, respectfully, not as a glutton. But this holiness is when you're human and not animal. What's the advantage in this week's Torah portion? Kedoshim to you should be holy. What does it mean to be holy? It means only one thing: don't be an animal. Most humans naturally are just sophisticated animals, right? Because what does an animal pursue? 2 things: survival and pleasure. That's all an animal cares about, and that's all they know how to care about.
Wait a minute. I don't call it pleasure. I would call it survival and procreate, which I don't know if that's, for an animal, if that's pleasure.
You think animals idealistically, altruistically procreate? They procreate because it's an instinct. It's an instinct.
It's an instinct, exactly.
So
it's that pleasure. Yeah.
Forget about that. Pleasure could be other things. Maybe the food they eat, whatever, or the places they want to hang out. Here's the sun. Here's the shade. They're hungry, thirsty. They're just looking to satiate pleasure. They're living by instinct, and we're looking to avoid pain. Yeah. Right? That's an animal. They're pain pleasure creatures.
Okay.
Now humans have a choice. You can either also be a pain pleasure creature, or you can be a right wrong creature. If you're a pain pleasure creature, which means you do whatever feels good and feels right to you, and whatever's convenient, and you don't do what's not convenient, well then you're just a sophisticated animal. Or do you choose the right wrong path? The right wrong, what's right is not always convenient or easy or pleasurable, and what's wrong is often very pleasurable. That's holiness. So the biggest challenges of pain, pleasure versus right, wrong is when it comes to food and sexual behavior.
I'm going to have to digest that.
People become most gluttonous, most indulgent when it comes to food and relationships. There's a story of the Baal Shem Tov. Once at the Baal Shem Tov's meal, there was a lot of people. The students used to gather at his Shabbat meal, and he would say Torah. And there was one person who joined one Shabbat, and this person wasn't so interested in the Baal Shem Tov's Torah. He wasn't so interested in sitting among his brethren, singing Nigunim. He was enjoying the food. And he was like digging in. He was asking for seconds. And he returned the plate back because he asked for medium rare. And this came back a little bit too medium and a little bit too rare. And it wasn't the perfect color. And it wasn't exactly as he wanted. And he said, no, send it back, bring it back, right? And have people around the restaurant sometime. I have a friend. It's actually my wife's friend. Amazing. No, she's amazing. Like the food comes and it's not perfect, but she'll eat 3/4 of it. And then she'll say, it was no good. It wasn't what I ordered. Bring me another one. So the Baal Shem Tov saw this, and now he's dressed like a chassid. He had a shtreimel on, he had the kapat. This goes back to what I said earlier. So the Baal Shem Tov used to have a practice whenever he wanted to communicate messages and visions. He would ask all the students to put their hands on each other's shoulders. There was like a connection going on, and he would be emitting like a vision. So everyone would close their eyes, and he knew how to telepathically transmit a vision into everyone's mind. And as everyone is, in this silent kind of meditative state, he transmits. And what's the vision that he transmits? It's an animal, like a bull, an ox, wearing a shtreimel and wearing a kapata, wearing a sartuk, like all the garb. But fressing, eating indulgently like an animal. This was the metaphor.
Did he say something?
Did the guy get it?
Hope so. The point is, just because there's a shtreimel doesn't mean that the face behind the shtreimel is a human face. It could be an animal face. Don't judge. We don't talk about others. Talk about ourselves. It's just this all for us to think about.
It just hurts when you hear these stories, because then people say, "Oh yeah, all of this population is like that. All of that population is like that."
Because people are very shallow. People judge based on these things. They classify everybody in these ways. Yeah.
We're just human.
Everyone's their own person.
Yeah. Remember, he was a murderer.
Now he's just a thief. That's right.
And there was once a young man who approached one of the tzaddikim. I'm trying to think who it was. Maybe it was the Kotzker Rebbe, one of the other Rebbes. He said, Rebbe, I need your help. I need your help because I need a tikkun. I need a spiritual repair for something I did wrong. What did you do wrong? This guy was single, and I slept with a woman. She wasn't my wife. And I spent the night with her. He said, "Ooh, yeah, that's it's no good, but we can fix it." So then he said, and he added, and he says, he was trying to make it a little lighter. He said, "But Reb, I want you to know that I was careful about it, and that I made sure she waited the 7 clean days until she wasn't menstruating anymore, and then she went to the mikveh, so she wasn't a niddah, she was pure." So the Rebbe told him, "Really? Then I cannot help you. Then there's no way to repair this. You told me that, it was an evening, you're in the bar, you're after a few drinks, and that was the environment and the vibe, and she gave you a wink, and they exchanged numbers, and it just happened in the heat of the moment." No, sins happen in the heat of the moment. You telling me you're prepared for a whole week for this sin? Well, I can't help you anymore.
Premeditated.
That's premeditated sin.
Yeah, first degree instead of second degree, right?
Right?
Murder.
Thief.
Okay, let's do a little more. What have we said? We're talking about even the empty ones in Tiberia are filled with mitzvahs like a pomegranate. That's why it's called the rakas. Rabbi Yirmiyah says rakas shma. Tiberia is called rakas. Okay, he says all the way around. We said before that it's called Tiberia. Sorry, but why is it called rakas? Now we're asking. No, he says it's called rakas. And why is it called Tiberia? Because the city sits at the center of Israel. Tabur is your navel, is your pupik. So Tiberias is the Tibur, is the pupik of Israel. Now, it's not talking about our current map of Israel because Tiberias is very high north. But I think in the biblical Israel, where a lot of the northern lands are part of Israel. Tiberias was in the center. Rava has another opinion. Rakashma, really, the city's name is Rakas. V'lama nikashma Tiberia. Why is it called Tiberia? Shetoiva ri'iyasa. You can divide Tiberia into two words. Tova ri'iyata. It has a beautiful appearance. It's a gorgeous city. What does that mean? So Tosfos commentary says very simply, it's got gorgeous. What does Tosfos say on the side, Mario? No, Tosfos on the side.
It explains that Tiberias' fine appearance came from its gardens and orchards.
Beautiful gardens, beautiful orchards, a very pretty city. Other commentaries take this from a more spiritual point of view. Tiberias was known to have this intense, heightened spiritual charge. That's why a lot of Talmidei Chachamim, a lot of sages, a lot of scholars were attracted there. There was a lot of high-level spirituality in Tiberia. Okay? So next time you guys visit Tiberia, you're going to have a whole different experience there, right?
I don't remember.
No? I've stopped off in direct times, and also the Rambam is buried there. I've been many times to the Rambam's gravesite.
Because Sfat is very close.
Yeah, pretty close.
Yeah, I've been to Sfat.
Yeah, I don't remember ever being there.
You got to go now. You've learned so much about it. Okay, let's try to cover a little more. Amr Ze'ira said the following comment. Kitzrain. There's another city called Kitzrain. What is that? Kitzrain is mentioned in the Torah, right? It's Tziperi. It's the northern city of Tziperi. So why is it called Tziperi? Sheyesheves b'reish har Kitzipor, because it sits on a mountaintop like the bird perched on top of a something. Tree, nest, wherever. The Gemara asks, Kitzur and Tziperi? Yeah, Kitzur is Tziperi. Doesn't make any sense. How come? Because we're going to identify Kitzur with something else completely. We know that Kitzur was a city that fell into the portion of the tribe of Zvulun. So when the 12 tribes entered into Israel, by way of lottery and divine spirit, the land was divided into 12 portions for each tribe. In Zvulun's portion, he had the city of Kitzur. How do we know? Because it says in the book of Judges, Zvulun lo yiherish es yoshvei Kitzur ves yoshvei nahalo. When the tribes entered into Israel, they were given a very important command. Either you go to the local inhabitants, and you tell them that we're in charge now. It's our land, and you can respect us. You can become a Noahide. You can serve God, and you can be a faithful person. Or if not, we kill you. This is the land of Israel. This is a holy land. No mucking around. Well, Zvulun was negligent, and he chose not to drive out the residents of Kitzur and the residents of Nahalo. Why? Because he said, they're the guys with the money. We can collect a lot of taxes from them. We can support our economy. So we use them to support the economy. Anyhow, it's not clear if the Torah, if the book is describing them favorably or negatively. There's a whole discussion there. However, so Kitzur and Nahalo were cities in Zvulun's land. Now, was Zvulun Mitzrayim? We know that Zvulun was very resentful for its portion in Israel. They were not happy. Shenemar, because it says in the pasuk, Zvulun am cheref nafshe lamus. Zvulun were a people who jeopardized their lives to the death. There's different interpretations of what this verse means, but they were not happy. How do we know this? Because compare the next part of the verse. Zvulun jeopardized their lives to the death, but Naphtali amarem esadeh. Naphtali were placed on the high fields. Zvulun compared themselves to Naphtali, and they said, look at Naphtali. Wow, they got the gorgeous fields and mountains, and they have such, good land, fertile land, and what do we get stuck with? So Zvulun was very upset. Zvulun, the tribe of Zvulun, turned to God, and they complained. And they said, Master of the universe, to all of my fellow tribes, you gave them wonderful portions of land with fields and vineyards. Me, you gave this mountainous, rocky cliff, hill, mountains, and hills. I think a very good portion. To my brethren, you gave good lands. Me, you gave me all kinds of rivers and seas and streams. I got nothing to work with over here. He was very upset. What did God respond to him? Amalek, God says, Kulan srichin l'chayde chilazin, you're making a big mistake. Yes, you don't have the vineyards. You don't have the lush lands to pasture animals. You know what you have? You have chilazin swimming in your seas. You know what chilazin is? What's chilazon?
One of those three guys.
It's either the murex tranquilus or the common cuttlefish or the bubble raft snail. Or there's a fourth option. That is none of the above.
The blue dye.
Chilazon is the source of the blue dye that was used to produce techelet. Techelet was the dye that was used very commonly in the Mishkan. When they built the tabernacle, a lot of the wool had to be dyed in the techelet color. It's like a bluish, greenish, and also a string on the tzitzit has to be in the color of blue. That's the mitzvah
So a lot of people
of the
do
Torah.
that, right?
So that was always a mitzvah. We're going to get to that in a moment. How do we know that? So the pasuk says, "Amim har yikrov sfunei tumunei chol." That in Moses' blessing to Zvulun, it says that. What's the translation over here?
They shall call the equal to the man.
And they have the hidden treasures of sand. Zvulun had the hidden treasures of sand. What are the treasures they had? So the Gemara interprets. Tana Rav Yosef taught. Sfunei, the covered. What was the covered thing that it had? Zu chilazon. It was the chilazon animal that produced the dye. Tmunei, what was the hidden thing they had? Zu taris. This was, what's tarit?
Rashi defines it as a tuna.
Tuna fish. Could be tuna, it could be sardine, some kind of exquisite fish. And choil, what was the sand? Huh? What is it?
Sardinella aulita.
Okay.
Round sardinella.
Oh, you're looking at here. Yeah. Is that a good fish?
Yep.
Okay.
That's the type.
All right. And choil, they had this special sand, a little special about that sand. Zuz chuchis levana, white glass. So they were already making glass in those days out of sand, but there's many different qualities of glass. Oh, you have color. I got black and white over here. Wow.
Yeah, mine's black and white. I bought a different book.
The small size is black and white. The big size is color. I don't know why. Anyhow, so they were already producing glass from sand back in those days, and there were different qualities. And apparently, from Zvulun sand, you can make the highest level quality of glass. So God turned to this is a very important lesson. We turn to Hashem and we say, "I don't have what they have." You're busy focusing where you don't have it. You know what you have. You have some of the highest commodities of the country. You can make a fortune. You have chilazon, you have tuna, and you have
Lithium.
precious sand, lithium.
Glass is lithium?
Well, lithium nowadays.
It's getting late. Let's just talk about chilazon for a moment. So the tchelet dye that was used for tzitzit, for the Mishkan, was made out of the chilazon animal. And for all the times of the Torah and all the times in Israel, they were using a chilazon animal to produce the dye. Probably around 1,000 or more years ago, we lost the tradition about what this animal is and how to produce this dye.
I think there's a tradition.
I think it happened more when the Jews left Israel after the destruction of the temple, and then it was a little lost. Now the Gemara says that the chilazon is a very odd or rare creature. There's an opinion that it only appears in the seas once every 70 years. So what is that? Okay. So for the past 1,000 years or more, no one's really had any tchelet dye. But about 150 years ago, there was a famous Rebbe, the Rudziner Rebbe, that he decided that he knows exactly what the chilazon is, and it's a type of cuttlefish. That's what he held.
A type of what?
Cuttlefish. This guy. And he tested, and he started to bring tchelet back into tradition. And people started to make tzitzit once again with the tchelet dye. Now, it was a minority opinion. Most people did not hold of it. Later in the 20th century, there was a great rabbi, Rabbi Herzog, who later became the chief rabbi of Israel. And he was Herzog, yes. Now his grandson is the president of Israel. I once met him. I spoke with him about his grandfather. So besides being an unbelievable rabbi and Talmid Chacham and scholar, he was also a brilliant person, and he got a degree in marine biology. And he did that because he wanted to explore the chilazon. And he decided that it is the Murex tranquillus marine snail. So today they are producing a lot of trello dyes, and a lot of companies out of that, or maybe out of the cuttlefish. I'm not sure exactly. It's becoming more and more popular. So today it's very common to find people to wear tzitzit or talit with the trello dye.
And it comes from one of those two things. It's not like fake dye.
Wow. You got it. Yeah. But the truth is that Kabbalistically, the Arizal, already 600 years ago, 500 years ago, wrote that we don't have tchelet today, not only because we don't have a tradition anymore, but because we're in a lower spiritual status than once upon a time, that we're unable to have tchelet. And until Mashiach comes, we're never going to be on the level to have tchelet once again. So Kabbalistically, or along those lines, there's a whole tradition not to use the tchelet because we don't have it today because of our spiritual low state.
I've never been rubbish with that.
Not really, no. And the Rabbi Rashab, the fifth Chabad Rebbe, wrote clearly that we agree with that we don't have access to the chilazon today.
That's pretty cool.
So it's a big debate. Now it's one of today's debates. Anyhow, Zvulun had it. It was in his land. So could you imagine how much they were paying for this stuff? A lot of money. Okay, so we're in the middle. This is all coming to tell. We're trying to figure out if Tziperi was Katron or not. Yeah, and we're in the middle of this whole passage, and I guess we will continue.
Something happened that I'd like to get your opinion